After a global pandemic and energy crisis, we have taken difficult decisions to put our economy back on track. We've supported families with rising bills, cut borrowing and halved inflation. Rather than a recession, the economy has grown. Rather than falling as predicted, real incomes have risen. Our plan for the British economy is working, but the work is not done. Others proposed a more short-term approach, but we have not made unaffordable pay offers to the unions. We have not stopped new oil and gas exploration, and we have not increased borrowing by £28 billion a year. That would have pushed inflation up just when we need to bring it down. Let's start with inflation. Now, the Shadow Chancellor didn't mention it in her conference speech. My conference speech was before hers, so all she had to do was a bit of copying and pasting, which I've heard she's good at. But it speaks volumes that during the worst global inflation shock for a generation, it didn't even get a mention. Well, if controlling inflation isn't a priority for Labour, it is for us. Finally, pensioners. The triple lock has helped lift 250,000 older people out of poverty since it was instituted by a Conservative government in 2011. It's been a lifeline for many during a period of high inflation. There have been reports that we would uprate it by a lower amount to smooth out the effect of high public sector bonuses in July, but that would have been particularly difficult for 1 million pensioners whose only income is from the state. So instead, today we honour our commitment to the triple lock in full. From April 24, we will increase the full new state pension by 8.5% to £221.20 a week, worth up to £900 more a year. This is one of the largest ever cash increases to the state pension, showing a Conservative government will always back our pensioners. Although I'm going to increase duty on hand-rolling tobacco by an additional 10% above the tobacco duty escalator, I know that for many people, going to the pub has become more expensive. I've listened closely to the persuasive arguments on alcohol duties from my honourable friend for Murray and my right honourable friend for Dumfriesshire, Clydesdale and Tweedsdale, fierce champions of the Scotch whisky industry. I've also listened to defenders of the great British pint, such as my right honourable friends for the Vale of Glamorgan and Buckingham. In my own constituency, to Councillor Jane Austen, who is a big supporter of the Jolly Farmer pub in Bramley, and indeed to the Sun newspaper. So, as well as confirming our Brexit pubs guarantee, which means the duty on a pint is always lower than in the shops, I have decided to freeze all alcohol duty until August the 1st next year. That means no increase in duty on beer, cider, wine or spirit. Including today's measures, our total commitment to easing cost of living pressures has risen to £104 billion. That includes paying around half the cost of the average energy bill since last October, and amounts now to an average of £3,700 per household. We are able to do that only because we reduced the deficit by 80% ahead of the pandemic. I now turn to reforms to pension funds that will increase the flow of capital going to our most promising growth companies in a way that also improves outcomes for savers. I'll take forward my Mansion House reforms, starting with measures to consolidate the industry. By 2030, the majority of workplace DC savers will have their pension pots managed in schemes over £30 billion, and by 2040, all local government pension funds will be invested in pools of £200 billion or more. I'll support the establishment of investment vehicles for pension funds to use, including through the LIFTS competition, a new growth fund run by the British Business Bank, and opening the PPF as an investment vehicle for smaller DB pension schemes. I will also consult on giving savers a legal right to require a new employer to pay pension contributions into their existing pension pot if they choose. meaning people can move to having one pension pot for life. The Right Honourable Lady opposite said when it comes to borrowing, she will take it up to £28 billion a year. Take it up, Mr. Speaker. Indeed, she has opposed every decision we have made to reduce our borrowing. But, Mr. Speaker, this side of the House will bring borrowing down because, as the late Lord Lawson said, borrowing is just a deferred tax on future generations. Now, I see the Leader of the Opposition shaking his head. In fact, we do have something in common. Both he and I wanted to make a Jeremy Prime Minister. In fairness, his party and mine are probably equally relieved we failed. But whereas this Jeremy is growing the economy, his Jeremy would have crashed it. Honourable Friend also promised to grow the economy. Since 2010, despite inheriting what was then the worst recession since the Second World War, Conservative administrations have presided over faster growth than many of our major competitors, including Spain, Italy, France. Well, they don't like to hear this, but let me tell them the list. Spain, Portugal, France, Italy, Netherlands, Austria, Germany, Japan. We've grown faster than all of them since 2010. But all those countries have faced a pandemic and an energy shock. And as a result, last autumn, the OBR forecast a recession in which the economy was forecast to shrink by 1.4% this year. Instead, it grew. In fact, it's grown faster than the euro area. Revised numbers from the ONS now say the economy is 1.8% larger than pre-pandemic. And looking ahead, the OBR expects the economy to grow by 0.6% this year and 0.7% next. After that, growth rises to 1.4% in 25, then 1.9%, 2% and 1.7% in 28. If we want those numbers to be higher, we need higher productivity. The private sector is more productive in countries like the United States, Germany and France because it invests more, on average 2 percentage points more of GDP every year. The 110 measures I take today help close that gap by boosting business investment by £20 billion a year. They do not involve borrowing more and ramping up debt, as some advocate. Instead, they unlock investment with supply-side reforms that back British business. But post-pandemic, we still have over 7 million adults of working age, excluding students, who are not working, despite 1 million vacancies in the economy. Many can and want to work, but our system makes that too hard. In the spring budget, I announced 30 hours of free childcare for working parents of 1 to 2-year-olds. That plan, still opposed by the party opposite, starts rolling out in April. It will help tens of thousands of parents return to work without having to worry about damaging their career prospects. Today we focus on helping those with sickness or disability and the long-term unemployed. Every year we sign off over 100,000 people onto benefits with no requirement to look for work because of sickness or disability. That waste of potential is wrong economically and wrong morally. So with the Secretary of State for Work and Pensions, last week I announced our Back to Work plan. We will reform the fit note process so that treatment rather than time off becomes the default. We'll reform the work capability assessment to reflect greater flexibility and availability of home working after the pandemic. And we'll spend £1.3 billion over the next 5 years to help nearly 700,000 people with health conditions find jobs. Over 180,000 more people will be helped through the Universal Support Programme, and nearly 500,000 more people will be offered treatment for mental health conditions and employment support. Over the forecast period, the OBR judged these measures will more than halve the flow of people who are signed off work with no work search requirements. At the same time, we'll provide a further £1.3 billion of funding to offer extra help to the 300,000 people who've been unemployed for over a year without any sickness or disability. But we will ask for something in return. If after 18 months of intensive support, job seekers have not found a job, we'll roll out a programme requiring them to take part in mandatory work placement to increase their skills and improve their employability. And if they choose not to engage with the work search process for 6 months, we will close their case and stop their benefits. Taken together with the labour supply measures I announced in the spring, the OBR say we will increase the number of people in work by around 200,000 at the end of the forecast period, permanently increasing the size of the economy. And so, Mr. Speaker, to the final supply-side measure in today's autumn statement for growth. Because of the difficult decisions that we've taken in the last year, today's OBR forecast shows that borrowing will be lower than forecast in the spring. Debt as a proportion of GDP will be lower than forecast in the spring. Inflation will continue to fall, and our fiscal headroom has doubled. I said I would cut taxes when we could, but only responsibly and only in a way that did not fuel inflation. The OBR today confirm I can deliver a package which does that. For businesses, I've today delivered the biggest business tax cut in modern British history, with the most competitive investment allowances of any large economy. For the self-employed, I've simplified and reformed their taxes by abolishing the compulsory Class 2 charge and cutting Class 4 national insurance. But high employment taxes on 27 million people working in the public and private sectors also disincentivise the hard work we should be encouraging. On top of income tax at 20%, they pay 12% national insurance on earnings between $12,570 and $50,270. That is a 32% marginal tax rate. If we want people to get up early in the morning, if we want them to work nights, if we want an economy where people go the extra mile and work hard, then we need to recognise that their hard work benefits us all. So today, Mr. Speaker, I'm going to cut the main 12% rate of employee national insurance. If I cut it by 1 percentage point to 11%, that would be an extra £225 in the pockets of the average worker every year. But instead, I'm going to go further and cut the main rate of employee national insurance by 2 percentage points from 12% to 10%. That change will help 27 million people. It means someone on the average salary of £35,000 will save over £450. For the average nurse, it's a saving of £520. For the typical police officer, a saving of £630 every single year. And, Mr. Speaker, I would normally bring in a measure like this from the start of the new tax year in April. But instead, tomorrow, I'm introducing urgent legislation to bring it in from January the 6th. So people can see the benefit in their payslips at the start of the new year.